My name is Lucas, and I don't trust mirrors anymore. When I was 10, my parents bought me an old mirror for my bedroom. It was tall and framed with dark wood, its surface slightly warped with age. They thought it would make my room look more grown up. I hated it immediately. It wasn't the way it looked, it was the way it made me feel, like something was watching me. At first I ignored it, but then I started noticing little things. My reflection seemed slower than it should be. When I turned my head, my mirrored self lingered just a fraction of a second too long before following. I told myself I was imagining it. Then, one night, I caught it smiling. I wasn't smiling. My blood ran cold. I stepped closer, staring at my reflection. The moment I blinked, it went back to normal. But I knew what I had seen. I didn't tell my parents. I was afraid they wouldn't believe me. Instead, I started avoiding the mirror, changing in the bathroom, looking away whenever I passed by. But it got worse. One evening as I was getting ready for bed, I dropped my toothbrush. When I bent down to pick it up, I caught a glimpse of the mirror out of the corner of my eye. My reflection hadn't moved. I shot upright, heart pounding. My reflection stood there, staring at me, completely still. My real body trembled, but the thing in the mirror, did and single quotes too. Then, slowly, it raised its hand and waved. I ran. I slammed my door shut, panting in terror. That night, I draped a blanket over the mirror. I didn't sleep. The next morning, the blanket was on the floor. That was the last straw. I begged my parents to get rid of it. My dad, irritated but amused, finally agreed. He carried it to the basement and leaned it against the wall. I felt relief wash over me. But that night, as I passed the basement door on my way to bed, I froze. The door was slightly open, and from the darkness below, I heard a whisper, "Lucas, I'm not in the mirror anymore. I never ran faster in my life." My name is Noah, and I was never afraid of the dark until the whispers started. I was 8 years old when I first heard them. Faint, hushed voices drifting from beneath my bed late at night. At first, I thought it was my imagination, the way kids sometimes think shadows are monsters. But the more I listened, the clearer the voices became. They were whispering my name. "Noah, come closer." I sat up in bed, my heart hammering. The whispers weren't loud, but they weren't random either. They were calling to me, beckoning me. I told myself it was just the wind, or maybe the house settling. But then, one night, I made a mistake. I answered back, "Who's there?" I whispered. Silence. Then, after a long pause, a breathy giggle. "We are." A chill ran down my spine. My throat went dry. I wanted to run, to call for my parents, but my body wouldn't move. The air in my room felt heavy, pressing against my chest. I forced myself to look down. The darkness beneath my bed was impossibly deep, stretching farther than it should have. The shadows weren't just shadows, they were moving. Then, a hand reached out. Pale, thin fingers curled over the edge of my bed frame, followed by another, and another. Too many hands. Clutching, grasping, pulling something up from the abyss beneath me. I screamed. My parents burst into my room, switching on the light. The moment the brightness filled the room, the hands vanished. The whispers stopped. My mom held me, rocking me back and forth, telling me it was just a nightmare. But I knew it. WASN single quotes too. From that night on, I refused to let my feet touch the floor after dark. I would leap into bed from as far away as I could, terrified that something would grab me if I got too close. My parents humored me for a while, but they didn't understand. Then, one night, my little sister crawled under my bed, looking for a lost toy. She screamed. By the time my parents ran in, she was sobbing, trembling, in terror. "The voices," she shrieked. "They told me to stay. They told me I belong with them." My parents moved me to another room that night. They never spoke about it again. We moved out of that house the next summer, but sometimes, in the dead of night, I still hear the whispers, and I know they're waiting for me to listen again. My name is Ben, and I don't remember drawing them. When I was 9, I loved to sketch. I would fill entire notebooks with doodles of superheroes, animals, and silly monsters. My parents encouraged it, even buying me a big sketchpad to keep by my bed in case I wanted to draw at night. Then, one morning, I woke up to find something strange, a drawing I had no memory of making. It was different from my usual doodles. The lines were rough, frantic, like they had been drawn in a hurry. The picture showed my bedroom, but something was off. In the corner, by my closet, was a shadowy figure, tall, featureless, its hands stretched toward my bed. I stared at it, confused. I didn't remember drawing this. Maybe I had been sleep drawing. My mom laughed when I showed her, saying I had a wild imagination. The next morning, there was another drawing. This time, the figure was closer. The next night, I forced myself to stay awake. I clutched my pencil, my sketchpad on my lap, determined to catch myself in the act. But at some point, exhaustion took over, and I drifted off. When I woke up, my sketchpad was on the floor, and there was a new drawing. The figure was now standing beside my bed. Panic shot through me. My hands were clean, no smudges of graphite, no aching fingers. I hadn't drawn this. I was sure of it. I shoved the sketchpad into my closet, determined to forget about it. But that night, I woke up to the sound of scratching, not on my walls, not on my door, on the paper. With shaking hands, I reached for the sketchpad and flipped it open. A fresh drawing stared back at me. This time, the figure was bent over me, inches from my face. I screamed. My parents ran in, flipping on the lights. I showed them the sketchpad, flipping through the pages in a frenzy. But the last drawing was gone. The paper was blank. They calmed me down, told me it was a nightmare, but I knew better. I threw the sketchpad away the next morning. I refused to draw after that. But last week, while visiting my childhood home, I found an old box of my things in the attic. Buried beneath dusty toys and forgotten books was my sketchpad, and inside, the last drawing had returned. The shadowy figure was still there, but this time, it was smiling. My name is Oliver, and I know my toy isn't just a toy. When I was 6 years old, my parents bought me a stuffed rabbit named Benny. It was soft, with long ears and a stitched-on smile. I carried it everywhere, even talked to it like a best friend. I was just a kid, of course. I thought it could hear me then. One night, it answered back. I was tucked in bed, the glow of my nightlight barely reaching the corners of my room. Benny sat beside me, its glassy eyes reflecting the dim light. I whispered my usual goodnight to him and turned over, pulling the blankets up to my chin. A moment later, I heard it. A tiny voice, whispering goodnight, Oliver. I froze. My breath hitched in my throat. Slowly, I turned my head back, toward Benny. The stuffed rabbit sat there, unmoving, smiling as always. My mind raced. Had I imagined it? Maybe I was just sleepy. I convinced myself it was nothing, and went to sleep. The next night, it happened again. This time, I was sure I hadn't imagined it. Oliver, wanna play? The whisper came from right beside me. My entire body locked up. I wanted to scream, to throw the rabbit across the room, but I couldn't move. My small fingers clutched the blanket as I forced myself to speak. How did you talk? Silence then, a giggle, soft and slow. I've always been able to talk, silly. You just never listened. I jumped out of bed, running to my parents' room in terror. My mom groggily walked me back, muttering that I was just having bad dreams. She tucked me in, patted Benny's head, and turned off the lights. The moment the door shut, the whisper came again. You shouldn't have told. I threw Benny across the room, heart pounding. The toy landed in the corner, lifeless. Or so I thought. Minutes passed, but I stayed wide awake, watching, waiting. Then movement. A slow, jerky twitch of the rabbit's arm. Its head tilted just slightly toward me. As if acknowledging my fear, I buried my face into my pillow, squeezing my eyes shut, praying for morning. When I woke up, Benny was back in bed, beside me. I begged my parents to get rid of it. They laughed, told me I was just dreaming, but I knew the truth. That night, I locked Benny in my closet. I barely slept, listening to the silence, every creak of the house making my skin crawl. Just as I felt my body relaxing, just as my eyelids started to droop, a scratching sound from inside the closet, slow, rhythmic, followed by a whisper through the door. "Oliver, you can't lock me away forever." I never screamed so loud in my life. The next day, Benny was gone. My mom said she didn't know what happened to it. Maybe it got lost. Maybe she donated it. I don't care. I just hope it never finds me again. But sometimes, late at night, I swear I hear a whisper from my closet, laughing. My name is Liam, and I know what I saw in my closet. When I was 7, I had an old wooden closet in my room. It was massive, towering over my bed, its doors creaking even when no one touched them. At night, when the lights were off, it always seemed darker than the rest of the room, like it absorbed the shadows. And then, one night, I saw the eyes. I had been dozing off when a soft creak pulled me from my half-sleep. My heart skipped. The closet door was open just a crack. I sat up, rubbing my eyes, telling myself it had just been the wind. But as I reached to turn on my bedside lamp, I froze. 2 glowing eyes stared at me from the darkness inside the closet. I couldn't breathe. The eyes weren't human. They were too large, too reflective, almost like a cat's but with no pupils. Just a dim, ghostly glow. They blinked, once, twice, watching me. I threw the blankets over my head, squeezing my eyes shut, whispering to myself that I was dreaming. But the creaking continued. Slow, deliberate. The closet door was opening wider. I wanted to scream, to call for my parents, but my voice refused to work. My body was paralyzed with fear. Then, the whisper came. Liam, ... I see you. It wasn't a child's voice. It was deep, rasping, like something trying to mimic speech, but getting it wrong. The blankets felt suffocating, trapping me in darkness, but I was too scared to move. Seconds felt like hours. Then the whisper came again, closer. Come play with me. I shot out of bed, bolting toward the hallway. My feet barely touched the ground as I flung myself into my parents' room. I woke them up in a frantic panic, babbling about the eyes in my closet. My dad groaned and walked me back to my room, grumbling about nightmares. But when we got there, the closet door was closed, and there was nothing inside but my clothes and a pile of toys. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. My parents assured me it was just my imagination, but I knew better. I stopped sleeping with the lights off. Every night, I would shove my dresser against the closet door, just in case, and for a while, nothing happened, until a few weeks later, when I heard the creak again. The dresser had been pushed aside. The closet door was open, and this time, the eyes weren't inside the closet. They were staring at me from the foot of my bed.